Books like the Da Vinci Code suggest the Templars blackmailed the Vatican, demanding special privileges in return for suppressing the bloodline of Jesus. But most scholars simply ascribe their sudden success to good connections. Evidence of their financial clout and influence still stands today.
The Templars were openly involved in financing and constructing most of the major Gothic cathedrals of the 12th and 13th centuries. They almost certainly financed the entire building of Chartres Cathedral. Financially, it would have been the equivalent of the American moonshot back in the late 60s.
One of the finest Templar churches stands in the heart of London. Called the London Temple, it displays the Templar seal, 2 men riding a single horse. Unlike most medieval churches, this one is round.
Such a church was designed to recreate the sanctity of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the destination of every pilgrim, the most sacred place on earth, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is round.
This wasn't just a church, it was a treasury.
The King of England came here to the London Temple and removed £50,000 sterling in 1307. It was like walking into Fort Knox and taking off with the gold. Huge resources were being managed and administered, apparently honestly and effectively, by the Templars.
Throughout Europe, the cash-rich Templars begin to lend money to cash-strapped nobles. The Templars had an edge over other Christian lenders. They could charge interest.
In Europe in the Middle Ages, very few people were allowed to transact with money because it was supposedly a sin, simony and usury, to lend money at an interest.
The Templars may have created the idea of the check and the line of credit. Pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land or other places would deposit money in a local Templar treasury. In return, a receipt showing the amount deposited.
You would finally make it to your destination. You would then cash in what amounts to a medieval traveler's check concept. This was like an early letter of credit.
Convenient, but costly. The Templars charged up to 10% for this service. The Templars vowed themselves to a life of poverty, but that didn't seem to affect their bottom line. How did the Templars reconcile their worldly riches with their beliefs?
The individual knights took vows of poverty, so they themselves did not own property. They themselves were not wealthy, but the order was allowed to hold that money in order to conduct its own businesses.
By the late 1200s, the Knights Templar are one of the richest and most powerful organizations in Europe. But envy and anger follow them, and a ruthless plot is set in motion. The Knights Templar is one of the most powerful organizations in Europe. But there's trouble ahead. The Crusades made the Knights Templar, and the Crusades are about to destroy the Knights Templar. Muslim armies converge on the Holy Land. After 2 centuries of warfare, Muslims are newly united under the Egyptian sultans. Support for the Crusades dwindles back in Europe.
The Crusades, over a period of time, became more expensive and in both life and resources for Europe, and began to look less and less like the kind of thing that would work in the long run.
Muslims crushed the Crusaders at the battles of Jaffa, Al-Mansura, and the siege of Safed. By 1290, the Templars hold only one castle in the Holy Land. At the siege of Acre, they lose that one too. The Holy Land is again occupied by Muslims. The Templars retreat to the island of Cyprus.
After the fall of Acre in 1291, you have a serious disillusionment with the idea of the Crusades, as the common populace saw the resources of Europe and the resources of the military going towards these holy wars that seemed to be futile. The role of the Templars seemed to be less tenable.
The Order's fate lies with a new leader, the French nobleman Jacques de Molay. He lobbies for a new crusade launched from Cyprus, but to no avail. 1307, de Molay arrives at the Paris headquarters of the Knights Templar.
He was asked to come to France by Pope Clement V in order to reassess their finances and in order to discuss their future endeavors. And it just happened that he showed up in France at a time when Philip IV, Philip the Fair, was experiencing a great deal of economic hardship.
Philip is known as the Fair for his handsome looks, but he's accumulated huge debts. His wars with England have put France in hock. His biggest creditor is none other than the Knights Templar.
Guy?
Philip decides to wipe out his loans with one stroke.
Yes, my lord.
Arrest the Templars and seize their money.
Bring them to the dungeons on the Louvre.
The king concocted a group of charges and
Make haste.
accused the Templars of the most vile forms of heresy known to the medieval mind.
Friday, the 13th of October, 1307. Some believe the modern superstition of Friday the 13th hails from this date. In just one day, Jacques de Molay and hundreds of French Templars are rounded up.
Jacques de Molay, by the order of the king, you are under arrest.
By what charge?
Heresy.
The arrests shock Europe.
Today, it might be as though we all woke up one morning, turned on the television, and heard that every single executive of every bank or corporation had been suddenly rounded up at dawn. I mean, it was of that magnitude.
The investigation of the accused begins in the usual way.
Confess!
Torture isn't the penalty for crime. It's a tool to extract a confession. The most common form of torture was the rack. A rack was simply 3 triangulated boards with a rope attached to a winch, and the idea was to dislocate the wrists and the ankles. In Paris alone, over 100 Templars are tortured, including their elderly Grand Master, Jacques de Molay.
I confess my sin of heresy.
There were 127 accusations levied against the Knights Templar. They included everything from denying Christ, spitting on the crucifix, defecating on the host, waving their bottoms at the Eucharist, kissing each other on the bottoms during their initiation rites.
Hundreds of Templars confess, including the Grand Master. But the confessions go beyond the original charges, moving from the odd to the bizarre. Knight after knight confesses to strange religious practices, including